Greetings, all! Today, we are going to take a special look at the fairy type and analyze its attributes, the Pokémon assigned to the type, and how it functions from a combative standpoint. Abnormal in almost every single way, and truly beyond the realm of complete scientific understanding, the fairy type is a powerful force that can more than make even the most ferocious of beasts quiver in their boots from sheer power or terror alone. The Pokémon assigned to the type might look all cutesy and harmless, but you would best be served not underestimating the incredible power that these strange pixies and beasts can wield when pushed. It might not be among the most common of types out there, or have a huge foothold against many opponents, but the fairy type is a unique weapon that can tear down the most dangerous of creatures and help prove that you don't always have to look like a serious threat to be one, especially with the might of near magic and the natural world's strangest energy force on your side. The fairy type, though likely known to exist by humans since ancient times, is a type that has only recently been described and analyzed scientifically as a result of the abnormal powers possessed by the type, and much of its biological functions and origins are still not well known. What is known, though, is that the type is primarily genetic in origin and seems to have developed to at least some degree in the same way that the dragon type has, which connects the types in a way that is still not fully certain. While the biological forms of the creatures assigned to this type might vary dramatically, they are unified in that they all possess access to a mysterious energy force simply known as the Fairy Force. Unlike other energy forces that are primarily used by Pokémon as a weapon in battle, Fairy Force energy exists not necessarily as an energy force on its own, but as a special energy aura that radiates from Fairy-type Pokémon and in turn grants them unique elemental attributes that are not observed among other types of Pokémon, thus serving as the type's defining feature. This special energy grants these creatures a substantial advantage over the fighting, dark, and dragon type especially that is not seen otherwise among other types, and is so potent that it has the capacity to completely shut down the offenses of dragon types and are in fact immune to the type completely, making it one of the few types that is not at risk of extreme damage from the otherwise brutish attacks of the type. This also translates into using the energy as a weapon, as while there are very few fairy-type attacks as a whole, almost all of them can be executed by effectively blasting off bits of this energy shield as a weapon. However, on this same note, this also means that the attack cannot be easily focused in the body of Pokémon in a wide variety of ways, since the energy is emitted and not used to energize the body typically, severely limiting the number of physical attacks that actually use the energy as a way of dealing damage. Regardless, the fairy type, though not very common, is a powerful type that can bring some unique strategies to the table and ultimately help to take out some of the most powerful Pokémon known, even when the Pokémon assigned to the type might not seem very outwardly threatening in the slightest. The fairy type can be found among a wide variety of different life forms as a whole, but at the same time the type is actually self-limiting by principle alone because, while the Pokémon assigned to the type might take on many different forms, they are not traditional life forms as a whole and thus cannot be classified so simply as plants, animals, or something else altogether. Instead, these creatures are divided up based on the form they take regarding whether it is like that of an animal, plant, or something non-living, with them taking on distinct forms that reflect that of specific types of living organisms, despite not really being a part of the biological families they might otherwise seem to be a part of. Even with this conglomerate grouping of biological bases, however, the forms that these creatures take do vary immensely and help to provide incredible versatility to the type in this aspect, always keeping others guessing as to whether or not a creature is part of the fairy type if the answer to that question is otherwise not known for certain, helping them to often get the drop on unsuspecting opponents not familiar with their powers and forms. The move variety seen among fairy-type Pokémon tends to be quite strong as a whole for most Pokémon, minus that for some pure fairy-type Pokémon, but this is an interesting case in that the versatility is not primarily because of the utility of the type itself. In other words, the move variety of Pokémon assigned to the type tends to be naturally diverse not because of the wide variety of types combined with the type, but, more precisely, because there are not that many fairy-type attacks known, thus forcing most fairy-type Pokémon to rely on other forms of offense as their primary way of inflicting damage in battle, with the general versatility of individual Pokémon varying widely from being quite good to quite poor. This, nonetheless, makes the type quite unpredictable in terms of what to prepare for, as a large variety of types paired with it among Pokémon assigned to the fairy type can help to make them a threat that is often best targeted for their other types, with their fairy-type offenses often being more of a supplement to their primary offenses, though a supplement that can prove to be a useful way to get an advantage against opponents that might not be expecting to see the full array of powers an opponent of the fairy type might have access to. In terms of stat averages for the fairy type, it can be said that the type does not have a ton going for it as far as the physical attributes of the Pokémon assigned to it go, but their special attributes are more than potent compared to other types. Fairy-type Pokemon tend to be a bit on the frail side when it comes to the majority of their basic attributes, physical especially, as they generally do not have a lot to offer in terms of both physical offense and defense, and typically don't have much stamina to work with or have great agility on their side in a lot of cases, resulting in the type's average base HP, attack, defense, and speed stats being below average compared to other types. However, even on this note, the type does have a great deal of magical energy flowing through them that helps to grant them some strong special powers, both in terms of being able to take and deliver hits through energy-based power, so the type typically shows above average base special attack and special defense stats compared to the other known types. This helps to set many of the Pokemon assigned to the type up as strong, long-range combatants that can throw down from afar and prove to be a serious nuisance to take down unless they can be targeted up close with direct attacks that rely on brute physical strength over energy to inflict harm. Currently, there are 50 recognized types of Fairy-type Pokemon, 16 of them being pure Fairy types and the remaining 34 being dual types. Additionally, 2 of the dual types are primary Fairy types, while the remaining 32 are secondary Fairy types. They are broken down into the following categories. Faunal-Morphs. These Pokemon are unified by the fact that they have all developed a biological form that resembles that of any traditional animal, but is otherwise genetically and morphologically distinct enough for it to be quite apparent that they are not normal animals in the slightest. These creatures have developed a wide array of powers and abilities in order to maintain their existence in varying environments, so little can be said about them that unites them characteristically or even anatomically. At the very least though, it can be said that these beasts will try their best to blend in and act or otherwise behave in a manner similar to the native Pokemon in their habitat of choice, but even then, their strange powers will isolate them from other Pokemon and serve to limit any usefulness their attempted disguise might bring them in protecting them from vicious predators. It is duly noted that one of these creatures is considered only as a Fairy type due to being an Alolan variant, with the type assignment of Alolan Ninetales being due to the unusual development of Fairy type powers from its extrasensory abilities upon evolving. Floral-Morphs. These Pokemon are unified by the fact that, instead of acting and developing like animals, they have instead chosen to go the opposite way and evolved alongside plants instead, even to the point of becoming plants themselves in the case of the cottony family. These few species are fairly uncommon to see as a result of their generally shy nature and prefer not to get involved in battle, but they are nonetheless able to defend themselves to some degree if attacked in the wild. Their survival in the wild is also not helped by the fact that they tend to be quite friendly towards strangers, Pokemon or human, and therefore have a bad habit of exposing themselves to attack as a result of this trusting nature. They are generally considered to be a positive benefit to the environment as a whole for all types of organisms though, so they are usually left alone to their own devices. Materialistic Constructs. These Pokemon are unified by the fact that they have chosen to imitate neither plant nor animal and instead prefer to exist in a form that has likely remained unchanged for most of their existence in the history of life. These odd life forms are the pinnacle of the bizarreness of the Fairy type and enjoy taking on forms that are otherwise more puzzling than anything in the wild. In the case of Carbake and Dainty, their bodies are created from a mass of rock and gem material that has been animated by the essence of the beast, a rare type of fairy force that exists as an entity in and of itself. Unfortunately, this essence does not work so well when the crystals began channeling solar energy instead, so they usually prefer to live underground. Klefki, on the other hand, have chosen a strange metallic form that may have originally been just an amorphous blob of metal before the advent of keys in human history. At that point, it seems that the species took such a liking to the form of man-made keys that they evolved a body designed specifically for the purpose of looking and acting like a key ring. Mimikyu are a relative mystery for the most part, and it is unknown exactly what they look like under their disguise, but the fact that they wear one helps to classify them as needing it for daily activities and thus a partial materialistic construct. The nature of the relationship between their fairy force powers and their spectral form is still being studied, but seeing as the only scientists to ever peek under their disguise died from sudden shock brought on by terror, what they truly are may remain a mystery for some time. Artificial. This special category is reserved for Magearna, a creature that stands out from other fairy-type Pokemon in that it is the only one to have ever been crafted by human hands. Magearna was given life by its creator through the gathering of life energy from many different Pokemon, forming an artificial soul of sorts that naturally generates and radiates fairy force energy. The machine was built and presented to the royal family of the Azoth Kingdom 500 years ago, but a disaster resulted in the creation being lost until rediscovery in modern times. This elegant creature might not be able to speak human speech, but it is more than capable of fluently understanding it and possesses a general intelligence far greater than that possessed by many other fairy-type Pokemon. Due to its mechanical construct, the creature is also capable of using its powers to help others and attack in ways that are not seen among any other Pokemon, in particular referencing its Fleur Cannon attack and its unique Soul Heart ability. Guardian Land Spirits. This special category is reserved for the Tapus of the Alola region, entities that serve as the guardian spirits for the 4 main islands of the Alola region and who have served as protectors of the region since the very beginning of human civilization on the islands. In the distant past, these entities helped to drive off invading Ultra Beasts and were able to do so with the assistance of the legendary Pokemon Solgaleo and Lunala, but they are generally not seen at all that much in modern times, as they have grown either indifferent or untrusting of the humans that occupy the islands, in turn leaving only the most dedicated and pure of challengers capable of awakening and engaging them once more. Their fairy-type powers might not be their strongest trait in all cases, but they nonetheless serve as their primal connection to nature and are able to use their power swiftly with their Nature's Madness technique, a special exhibition of fairy force power that only the Tapu Guardians can perform. In looking at the fairy type's advantages and disadvantages in battle, in terms of offense, the fairy type has 3 advantages, 3 disadvantages, and no negative immunities. The type is at an advantage against the fighting type because the fairy type has a similar effect on the minds and bodies of fighting types as does psychic energy, effectively scrambling the minds of its targets and weakening their physical forms to deal more damage to them than they might otherwise deal. The strange nature of fairy force energy makes it hard to discern exactly why this is the case, but it can at least be said that this does seem to work on pretty much all Pokemon of this type in some fashion or another, and thus poses a serious hazard to those of the fighting type. It is distinct enough to be considered separate from the psychic type, however, as it affects not the mind, but the entire body more so, and thus has elemental properties that shift it into a distinct category all of its own. The type is at an advantage against the dark type, because fairy force energy has the capacity to readily dissipate certain types of exotic energy, with anti-positive energy being one of them. Not only does this mean that the damage they receive from dark type attacks is reduced, but more importantly, this same dissipation has the result of committing this action when the energy comes into contact with the body of a dark type. As a result, dark types hit by fairy type attacks can have their internal energy reserves depleted and damaged as the energy is dissipated out of them, dealing severe damage to their form as a whole in the process. The type is at an advantage against the dragon type for reasons that is still not fully understood, but it can at least be said that the strange draconic energy that flows through the body of dragon type Pokemon and their elemental attacks is completely dissipated by the energy force of the fairy force and is thus rendered completely useless against their power. This has the effect of rendering these creatures highly weak to exposure to fairy force energy, and thus represents one of the very few viable weaknesses that the type has. This can make even the mildest of fairy types a useful weapon against these otherwise monstrous beasts, and helps to quell their fury and the devastating power and vicious temperament that they otherwise can bring to a fight. The type is at a disadvantage against the poison type because, much as with the grass type, the frail immune systems of fairy type Pokemon render them highly vulnerable to the toxic effects of poison type attacks. Why they have such weak immune systems is still the subject of much debate, but it may have to do with their general isolation from breeding directly with other Pokemon in the wild when not in open areas. Regardless, as a result, they are unlikely to use their full power when attacking to avoid risking the need to even go near poison types, and the fairy force energy used in fairy type special attacks, for some reason, is also readily dissipated by the toxic properties of poison types, leaving it equally ineffective in that regard. The type is at a disadvantage against the fire type for reasons that are also still not entirely clear, but it appears that extreme heat has the power to destabilize and dissipate fairy force energy to a surprising degree. This results in the weakening of any attack delivered that utilizes fairy force energy as its primary elemental energy source. How and why this is the case is something that is still very poorly understood, but it does at least show that the fairy force energy has some sort of thermal property to it, and that is something worth taking note of, if only as a way to help counter the otherwise bizarre type in battle. Lastly, the type is at a disadvantage against the steel type as a whole because of both the rugged form and energy reflecting capabilities of the type. Metallic armor is designed to be incredibly strong and rigid, unwilling to give out over most types of applied pressure or force, and can physically withstand crushing blows from most other types and prove to be a physical nightmare to have to get past without armor-breaking powers of some sort. Likewise, the metallic composition of most types of metallic armor allows them to readily reflect or at the very least disperse the energy used in many fairy-type special attacks, granting the type a powerful natural defensive shield against this type of offense, regardless of whether the offense is physical or special in nature. Defensively speaking, the fairy type has 3 resistances, 2 weaknesses, and 1 immunity. The type is resistant against the fighting type because the effects of fairy force energy on the traditional uses of fighting type moves is very similar to that of psychic energy. In particular, Fairy Force energy has the power to disperse the energy used in fighting type attacks, both kinetic and otherwise, and thus works against these otherwise powerful strikes and keeps them from inflicting the damage they otherwise would. The confusion and mind scrambling that comes with this often leaves fighting type Pokemon afraid to use their full power on Fairy types for fear of the damage that Fairy Force energy can inflict on their bodies in high concentrations, thus overall making the type fairly ineffective against these magical creatures. The type is resistant against the bug type because it seems that the Fairy Force energy exuded by Fairy types has the abnormal effect of confusing and repelling bug types for reasons that are still unclear. It might have something to do with their brain structure or natural biology, or may otherwise simply involve other unknown attributes connected to Fairy Force energy. Regardless, as a result, these creatures are unable to attack Fairy types readily in a fight out of some strange fear of what they cannot readily understand or even begin to analyze, and their special attacks are dissipated partially in turn by this aura of Fairy Force energy, weakening the type as a whole and making strikes of the type less effective against fairies than what one might initially expect to observe. The type is resistant against the dark type because Fairy Force energy has the unique power to dissipate certain types of energy quite effectively, and anti-positive energy does happen to be one of them. This means that any attack that uses the energy to deliver damage will have the energy completely or at the very least partially dissipated, weakening the attack as a whole. It is still uncertain why this is the case, but the strange attributes of the Fairy type know no bounds, and can in turn put the creatures of darkness associated with the dark type in a world of trouble if they don't have non-dark type offenses available to help counter them. The type is weak against the poison type, as Fairy type Pokemon have mostly developed their bodies in areas that are relatively clean of toxins or otherwise have physical forms that do not prevent them from easily being infected with disease. While this may seem counterintuitive to their weakness, the effects of being isolated in birth to these areas has resulted in these creatures not needing to develop a strong immune system of any sort, and as a result, they do not have the biological systems needed to fend off toxins when directly attacked with them, in turn taking severe damage from attacks of this type. This makes the poison type one of the few that can effectively handle the Fairy type, and in turn, one of the very few types that the poison type as a whole has a noticeable advantage against. The type is weak against the Steel type because the Fairy Force energy that flows through the bodies of Fairy type Pokemon is not only unable to readily penetrate through metallic armor, but, more importantly, seems to be readily dispelled by it for some reason or another, leaving any Fairy types that come into contact with metal weakened. As a result, the metallic body parts used to deliver Steel-type physical attacks can penetrate through their defenses rather effectively, dealing critical damage to their weakened forms without their signature energy field to help buffer against damage. In addition, the Fairy Force energy that courses through these creatures is very much dispelled through the use of pure light energy, allowing Steel-type special attacks to have the same sort of damaging impact as physical ones. Lastly, the type is immune to the Dragon type for reasons that are, again, still not entirely clear, but it seems that Fairy Force energy has the unique capacity to halt and dissipate Draconic energy completely. Not only does this process remove the elemental attributes that define the Dragon type and its attacks, but it also severely weakens the power behind whatever blow is otherwise coming at them, to the point where the damage it might otherwise deal is completely nullified. This makes the Fairy type the only type that is immune to the damaging power of the Dragon type, and in turn, the ultimate anti-dragon tool that any trainer can get a hold of, rendering the otherwise weaker Pokemon assigned to the type a noticeable threat against the otherwise unstoppable power that many Dragon-type Pokemon possess. As far as using the Fairy type in battle goes, while the type might not always have much in the way of extreme power to show in a fight, it can nonetheless prove to be a useful type to have around, and one that many trainers can pick up on quickly, if only because of the ease of raising Pokemon assigned to the type. Pokemon assigned to the Fairy type tend to be much friendlier than typical Pokemon and can thus be quite easy to raise and get along with. However, this friendly demeanor can prove to be a bit of a problem in a combat scenario, as these creatures are more likely to want to play than to actually battle, and it can thus be a bit hard to get them to attack others without a reason other than for the sake of a battle. As a whole, the Fairy type is filled with Pokemon that do not exactly have the best of stats, nor does the type itself have many strong attacks under its belt, leaving many Pokemon that rely on the type for offense in a tough bind without ready access to even decently powerful attacks until very late in their life, if at all. The type is further held back by the fact that there are very, very few physical attacks that can be assigned to the type, limiting its capacity to target Pokemon that otherwise have weaker physical defenses compared to the special defenses. However, despite the issues holding the type back and the generally weak nature of many of the Pokemon assigned to the type, it does house some of the strongest Pokemon known, and these few can go far beyond their Fairy type attributes to make themselves a severe danger even to the types of Pokemon they are otherwise normally weak against. Moreover, many of these stronger Pokemon tend to be highly intelligent, and while intelligence does vary between species, the Fairy type tends to host a lot of intelligent Pokemon, which serves to aid in raising them and making them into combatants that can think on their feet and make the most of whatever offenses they may have. The fairy type is one that is more often associated with pretty Pokemon and friendly partners than rugged fighters that can make a name for themselves, but it would be foolish to underestimate them just for that. They might be pretty and colorful on the outside, but you would do best not to treat them as weaklings, or these monsters will gladly show you the mysterious power they hold inside them and the true potential that is locked in the amazing energy that flows through them and fills the air around them with a truly magical sense of wonder. Thank you all for watching this video. It is always an honor to be able to speak with you all on the subject of Pokemon in a way that brings me great joy and happiness in my work. If you would like to keep tabs on past and future work, click that subscribe button, check out my work on DeviantArt, and don't be shy about following me on Twitter, where you can find pertinent announcements on upcoming work before it is officially posted. Links to both can be found in the video description. If you would like to support my work and help Miguel and I continue to produce more content for you and improve upon our presentation, please visit us at my Patreon page, which you can also find a link to in the video description.
Yeah, no.
With that, I thank you for watching and I wish you well.